Auburn and Oklahoma, what a game. Dramatic finish, to say the least. Dramatic game when you think about the officiating, and we'll get to that. But let's start with the fact that Oklahoma wins this game 24-17 in Norman. Great atmosphere. Jackson Arnold, of course, comes back. Let's start with the good things. And before we get into the drama and before we get into the negativity, let's start with the fact that OU's defense looks dominant. This is one of the most physical defenses, not only in the SEC, but in the country. We knew Brent Venables and this defense were going to be physical. They're fast, and it starts on that defensive front. Having our Mason Thomas back in the second half of this game made an immediate impact. They set a school record, 10 sacks in this football game. Jackson Arnold and that Auburn offensive line were just, their hands were full. There was nothing they could do. It didn't matter how they shifted their coverage, what they tried to do, any packages, any kind of play calls. This Oklahoma defense was all over the field. So props to that unit. They were prepared. They did not let Jackson Arnold's legs be a problem for them. And quite honestly, nobody's legs were. Auburn only ran the ball for 67 yards. Not that Oklahoma's was much better, but it just goes to show the dominance from really both of these defenses. But in the fact that Oklahoma wins this game, Venables' defense looked extremely good. Now, Auburn defensively didn't play a bad game either. They forced a turnover in there. Oklahoma was 3 for 12 on third downs. Neither team really that efficient on third downs. Now, Oklahoma did have that big fourth down conversion there. 306 yards of offense for Oklahoma. So, look, Auburn's defense did what they needed to do. I thought there was going to be a turnover at some point from both teams in this game. We knew the kryptonite of Auburn being turnovers for how long now, since Hugh Freeze has been there at least. It wasn't the kryptonite this time, and I'll tell you what it was, and it wasn't Auburn's defense. It was their offense and the penalties. My goodness. Now, I understand penalties were high for both teams, and they were both offensive and defensive penalties for either unit, but 13 penalties for 85 yards for the Auburn Tigers. That is not a sustainable way to win a football game. The amount of false starts from that offense. In week 4, mind you, I understand it's a loud environment. I get it. But I think about Michigan, just went there last week, didn't have nearly as many false start penalties with a true freshman quarterback in a night game, same environment, same atmosphere, same difficulty of play. It's really hard to wrap my head around how that common of a mistake happens that common. So that really did not help Auburn. It felt like every time they took a step forward, there was one step backwards. On the ground, it just Damari Alston and those guys just never really could get going. Jackson Arnold's legs weren't a factor because he had nowhere to go. The rush lane integrity out of Oklahoma was extremely effective. You could tell they practiced that all week. They've watched the film. They knew Jackson Arnold's legs would be a key factor, so they didn't let it be. So again, props to that Oklahoma defense. But Auburn really shot themselves in the foot. And to be fair, both of these teams really did. It was a sloppy but physical game. Let's get to the officiating side of things, because from what we all know and what we all witnessed, this, of course, had to have some drama to it. Let's start with early on in the game, right? The catch, so-called fumble, and recovery for a touchdown early in the game for the Tigers, first quarter at that was overturned back to an incomplete pass. That rule is just so bang-bang for me. I think back to even 2019, the Ohio State-Clemson playoff semifinal Fiesta Bowl. If it was, it's always been the PlayStation Fiesta Bowl, I think, at that time, before it's the Verbo now. But when I think it was Justin Ross, maybe, or whoever it was, I can't even remember who it was at this point, caught the ball, kind of had their arms outstretched. Ohio State hits their arms, they pick it up, they end up overturning it. We've started to see that a lot more now, this idea where there needs to be 2 steps, and I get that. But even in this play, it feels like, hey, catch, control. The moment you take even 1 step and turn upfield, I just feel like the ball has to be live. And I don't think that Oklahoma robbed Auburn or Auburn got robbed off this call. Like, a rule is a rule, and this is nothing new. All right, we've seen this called countless times, and it's been reversed to an incomplete pass. So it's not like we're seeing the very first time this has ever been called, and it's a joke. Now, am I saying I agree with it? No, I think it's partially silly. I think that there's got to be a quicker moment where it's like, hey, this is a football play. He's caught it. Both hands are on the ball. He's getting ready to tuck it. Like, let's be physical, and let's not reward the defense for making a play on the football. So just tough. 50-50 bang bang doesn't go Auburn's way. Then the biggest of them all is the hideout play, right? We watched Oklahoma. They run to the sideline. They act like they're coming off the field. They end up staying in. They run a deep route, and he's wide open. Auburn doesn't get to it. That is not allowed. The SEC has come out and made a statement that that's not allowed. However, they state the fact that, we're going to we're looking at it, we're going to do something about it. Well, what exactly can you do about it? Right? That's the toughest thing. That's the question you have to ask yourself is like, what is there to do about it? The game's over. It was, of course, an impactful play. You take those 7 points off the board. This is a 17 game, right? In theory, okay, it's entirely difficult for either team to pin one play on the entire game. But what's to say in overtime? What could have happened? What for the Auburn Tigers? Like, it is extremely infuriating to know that that was allowed, and then for there to be backtrack and that touchdown to be essentially considered void. Yet there's nothing they can do about it. So excruciating loss for Auburn in so many different ways. That officiating, right? The penalties, the mistakes. However, this is a good team. They have to keep their chin up. The schedule only gets tougher for both of these schools moving forward. Oklahoma's got to get the run game figured out, guys. 35 yards rushing is not going to cut it. It really isn't. If they want to win this conference and they want to win a national championship, they have to figure out the run game. I wasn't a big fan of Arbuckle's game plan. I thought that last drive, when they moved the ball down the field, was probably the best looking drive. They utilized the quick slants. They kind of took what Auburn was giving. Auburn was really just playing a cover 2 shell all game. They did not want to get beat deep. And it's like, oh, you just never tried to establish any kind of underneath or any kind of zone read run game. So that's all I got for that one. Again, dramatic, lots to talk about. Officiating has to be better. I hope, I don't know what's going to come of this, but I hope we get some accountability. Or I'm sure you guys have heard Josh Pate hit on this, and I agree with him more than everything. We need a governing body when it comes to that. There has to